Today I want to visit Kyoto, Japan with you through a watercolor painting. Hi, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. Last summer, I visited Japan with my family. Kyoto is one of the places we visited. It was a brief stop and I wish we had a lot more time. It was the first time I visited that place and it was beautiful. It was really hot. I remember we were all sweating and looking for shades. But looking back, it was a wonderful experience with my family. I took this photo on top of the stairway that leads to the street. You see the Toji Temple on the right, a landmark of this place, and you see the rooftops of houses and the stores on the street. It was a really beautiful day, aside from being really hot. And one of the advantages of being an artist is that you get to revisit that place by painting it. So today I want to share with you the process of this painting and revisit Kyoto. Okay, so let's take a look at the process of this painting, and we start off by doing a line drawing. At first glance, looking at the photo, it looks pretty simple. It's just a couple buildings and a bunch of trees and the sky. But once I starting to draw the line drawing, I realize how complex all the buildings are. This is not the first time I underestimate a subject, and this is probably not going to be the last. But since I started, I try my best to do the drawing. That being said, because I want to give myself an easier time to do this painting, I am not pressuring myself to make everything super accurate. So I stay loose and I eyeball most of the perspectives in this drawing. As long as the shapes and sizes are not way off, you should be okay. One of the things I really love about Japan is their respect to nature. When I visit Kyoto, I feel like the buildings and everything integrate with the nature around it very nicely. Especially if you visited any shrines in the countryside, they usually fit within the nature very nicely and they're not looking out of place. And now I'm looking back to the playback. I realized the top of the Toji Temple is a little bit crooked. There's no excuse, I messed that part up because I wasn't really focused when I was doing the line drawing. I was actually talking to a friend in a voice chat, so I wasn't really focused. There's no excuse. I did manage to correct it a little bit when I started to paint. All that being said, I really enjoy the process of this painting, and to me, that's all that really matters. And that's a good mental relief for me. Whenever I end up with a painting that's not so good, I usually just tell others, well, at least I had fun painting it, so that was a good excuse. So the first wash, I actually started from the land, which means the houses and now the trees. The rooftops are very bright because of the sun, but I still want to give them just a little bit of color so they are not just pure white. And since I pre-wetted the whole bottom half of the painting, I started to paint the trees wet onto wet. It helped me to establish some big connected shapes. So as long as you try to be mindful and not to paint into the rooftop, you're okay. Now, the wash is still a little bit wet, so some paint did start to seep in, and I quickly just press it out with a piece of paper towel. And since it is still moist, I start to do some wet onto wet and added some darker values to convey some volumes of all the trees. The key is to simplify all the shapes so all the trees are connected into as few simple big shapes as possible. So again, try to paint around the rooftop because we do want to maintain those rooftops as bright as possible. I'd also start to go ahead and paint some darker parts of the house under the roof, just to establish some basic color and value contrast. And like I mentioned earlier, the photo looks pretty simple, but To make it look good, you have to paint the right shapes in the right place. And that's what's tricky to me in this painting. And what was interesting is that my mental state when I was painting this subject feels very calm and serene. It's very fitting of this subject, even though I was voice chatting with friend. And now I'm going to paint the sky, so I pre-wet some areas in the sky, and I paint the blue sky in. And when I paint the thicker part of the cloud where they are a little bit darker, I try to leave some edges light. Clouds have different thicknesses, so the thick part of the cloud are a little bit darker because they are so thick the light cannot penetrate through as much. But the thin part of the cloud, especially on the edges, they absorb the light and some of the light penetrates through, so you see the silver lining of the clouds. That's what I'm trying to achieve here. And these all needs to be done while it is still moist. I did spray a little bit of water mist with my spray bottle, but I still need to paint relatively fast with very little hesitation. And it's funny that most people who saw this painting, they said that the sky is their favorite part of the painting. And that's arguably the easiest part of the painting, definitely the fastest. So it just kind of shows that watercolor is at its best when it's doing its thing without you trying to control everything. The more you try to control it, the less watercolor is going to feel like watercolor, if you know what I mean here. So oftentimes when people are really frustrated with the watercolor medium, one of the factors is that they try to control it too much. And if you really want to control the medium that you're using, watercolor is not necessarily the best medium for you. It might actually be a very helpful tool if you want to learn how to relinquish your control, if you want to relax your mind and just let it flow. Watercolor can be actually a really good training medium for this. So I just painted the shape of the Toji temple. Not a lot of detail since it is way in the back. So just focus on painting the right silhouette, a good shape, and if you are able to do that, it should look pretty good. And I continue down and starting to paint the houses in the background. Remember to leave some highlights to hint there's a structure and a form. Some more buildings on the left side. And you can see how simple I try to make those shapes. The colors are very simple as well. The colors that I mix are usually towards the warmer side. I think that's just how I like to mix my color. And if your color tend to be a little bit cooler, that's totally fine as long as they work together and look harmonious. So I added a little bit of glaze on the rooftop just to give them a little bit more color because they look a little bit too white after the first wash is dried. And the trees are going to be darker still, so I just paint over them. So now the wash is dry, I go back in and paint some darks on the Toji temple to separate the roof and the side of the tower a little bit. This will give the sense of structure and lighting. I also use the tip of my brush to give just a tiny little bit of details. Not too much though, just a bit of hints. Continued it down. And that looks good to me. The top is still a little bit slanted, but that's also due to the paper warped a little bit because of the wetness. After it's done, after it's dry, it actually straightens up a little bit better. Few dark details for the buildings in the back, just to make him look a little bit more complete. And now I start to work on the trees again. So the tree needs to be darker and also needs to feel a little bit more vibrant as well because it is a sunny day. Those greens should be very vibrant. So I just go over another layer, make them a bit darker, but also make the color a bit more saturated. And since it is a new wash, we introduce wetness again, so that presents another opportunity to do some wet onto wet again. And when I was painting the tree, I realized how similar it is for these groups of trees to the cloud. Part of the trees are thicker because there are more leaves, it's more lush. Part of the trees are thinner because fewer leaves, and they also have subsurface, which means the leaves absorb the light and some light penetrates through. So when I'm doing wet onto wet, I also leave some light on the edges, and that creates a very beautiful effect of the trees without painting hundreds and thousands of leaves. And that's usually the way I like to treat this. I think throughout the years, my painting has become more and more simple in a way, not just because it feels more relaxing to paint in this way, but also I want the viewers to feel the sense of peace and calmness and relaxed when they look at my painting. So my painting might look a little bit boring, if you would, but that's what I want to do. I don't want to create a lot of visual stimulation. I want the people who look at my painting can feel relaxed and can feel at ease. It might also due to the fact that I am getting older as well, so who knows. And personal style is always this huge mystery that every single artist is trying to get. And I believe I am on my journey trying to figure out my personal style as well. But I also believe it is something happens a little bit naturally instead of trying to force it. I am in process of making a video talking about personal style, and I'm interviewing some artists that I really like and respect, so stay tuned on that. So all the other trees are pretty much the same process. I felt pretty happy and joyful when I was painting this painting because it brought me back some wonderful memories during my family trip to Japan. And that's the experience that I enjoy the most when it comes to painting. A while back, I did a video talking about the rise of AI art. My thought about it hasn't changed. I believe that AI is not able to replace the experience of creating art. It's not able to give you the joy and the happiness of the process. Of course, I do believe it is a fact that there are artists who create image for a living. Their jobs are getting threatened by the advancement of AI because it's so much faster and cheaper. And that is a whole nother topic that I don't really have a solution for it. Like I mentioned, I am not smart enough for that. But what I wanted to say is that just because AIs are so good at creating quote-unquote art and images, we shouldn't give up on painting because of it. I believe in the value of the process when you are part of it. That's what makes it special. That's what gives your painting life, is because of your engagement. Last year when I was in Taiwan, we had a meetup with some of the audiences. My 13-year-old son was there, and my cousin was there too, and she asked him which one is his favorite painting. My son didn't answer directly to the question, but he was able to look at each of the painting and was able to recall the location and the trip that we went. And that made me very, very happy. I believe art in the very beginning is a way to record history. It's the way to record people's life. And when we paint our favorite places or people around us, isn't that recording history as well? Even though they are not significant historic event, but those moments and people could be important to you. Okay, so I think we derailed long enough. Since the tree process are mostly the same, I didn't really talk about all the other trees. But now back to painting. Now I'm painting the tree branches and leaves in the foreground. Those are much closer to us. And in the beginning, I was debating if I want to paint those. But at the end, I decided to paint it because that's something I remember in my memory. And that canopy of trees was really providing us some shades and also create a great amount of depth in the painting as well. So I decided to paint those in. But as always, I try to stay loose, so I only hint a little bit of the leaves And for the rest of the tree, I try to connect the shape together. Just try to have a little bit different, a little bit more articulated silhouette, and try to make the tree darker so they appears to be a lot closer to you. One thing to watch out for is that you don't want to use the same brushstroke over and over again, because that's going to create similar shapes all over the place. And if you have too many repetitive shapes, it can start to look flat and look boring. You want to change up your brushstrokes and varying your shapes so that the painting doesn't look as flat and looks a little bit more interesting and natural. Just some dark finishing touches here. And I feel that we still need some dark values in the trees. So I mixed some darker values and added some dark to the tree on the left to make the light of the rooftop pops a little bit more, but also added a little bit more volume to the trees. And we are finished. I hope you enjoy your visit to Kyoto in my painting, and I hope you enjoy this process video. I encourage you to paint the places that you visited, and perhaps you will be able to revisit that place in your memory. I'm Eric from Cafe Watercolor. Hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are. I will see you guys next time.